So, for various reasons and circumstances, we have not been together here since before the 7th of October, which means that just strangely, it's given me so many weeks to write and rewrite, and even now I don't know where to start. I really don't know where to start. For many of us, not all of us, but for many of us, our lives and our world has completely changed. And I appreciate and I respect that not everyone can necessarily relate to that. I've spoken, not right now, but in other times, with younger people about, in a sense of relationship to a place that they've never visited, and it's meaningless to them. It doesn't make any sense at all. Some have an easier time with it, some a tougher time. Maybe it depends on how you've grown up, what has been echoed in the home over and over. For some, there are political issues attached to it. For some Jews, they have an easier time relating to the cause of Palestinians, being able to see them as an underdog in the old paradigm of David versus Goliath, which I grew up with, being taught that Israel was David. And Goliath was the entire Arab world waiting to destroy Israel and push the Jews into this ocean as they promised to do at some time. And yet many people don't see it that way today. Israel is seen as Goliath, certainly because of its relative size, certainly because of its military power. And the rest of us, even those of us who do experience connection to Israel, it's possibly been difficult to escape the impact that politics, Israeli politics, even American politics, has had for us. And yet, right now, it feels for me that politics is not even a place that I have much energy to go to. It just, today, doesn't feel like the issue. Certainly, I'm referring to recent Israeli politics of the past few months, not the greater issues which have hung over Israel and which have never been successfully resolved for so many reasons. Over all these years that we've been having, building, experiencing a relationship or not with Israel, not for all of these years, but certainly yes, for all of these years, Israel has had a complicated relationship. It's in a tricky neighborhood. As I once heard Thomas Friedman saying, it's not Switzerland surrounded by Belgium and Italy and Germany and who knows what else. Things are more complicated. When I was in college, I took a political studies class in conflicts and national conflicts, of studying in all places in the waning days of apartheid South Africa. What we learned in terms of the political theory is that a simple colonialist problem, where a colonial power comes and settles somewhere, mostly driven by material concerns the natural resources, the markets, etc., labor to take back, it's very easy to see who is to blame, who was there originally, and what might need to be done to solve the problem. But when the issue at heart is religion, it is next to impossible. Because how do you tell either group that what they have received, even in terms of the message from God, is wrong? And so, while you are completely entitled to disagree with me, the way that I've always understood it is we don't have the luxury of having one side being wrong and the other side being right. We have the almost thus far unsolvable quandary of two parties both being right. Two parties both seeming to have some kind of legitimate claim. Two parties both seeing themselves historically as victims. Two parties that have been unable to look at their own demons. Two parties that have been unable to look at the other and see their pain and their suffering. In more recent years, there have been episode after episode after episode where Hamas has at times sent tens, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands of rockets into Israel. And the question is always why? Why do they do it? Because they don't like a particular policy of the Israeli government? That's why they do it. You send maybe just a few rockets at a time in the hope to get them to give up the entire West Bank. No, that can't possibly be the aim. It'll never succeed. So I'm not a political scientist, but the only answer that I've ever been able to come up with is escalation. Escalation for escalation's sake. That if you do not believe that someone has a right to live, if you do not believe that someone has a right to be somewhere at all, then possibly you start off behaving like a mosquito. Just annoying the you-know-what out of the other person, buzzing around their head. They try to grab you, but you're too quick. Just annoying. Just annoying. Then the next time you come back, maybe you bring a buddy with you. Now there are two mosquitoes flying around your head, and the level of annoyance and the impact on daily life gets that much more. The next time even more. But it's never enough to actually accomplish anything. And especially if you articulate how you see your position, as they have. That history is on your side. What you're saying to the world is we can keep this up as long as we have to. And we can add more and more annoyance and more frustration and more anxiety. But there's got to be some end game. There's got to be some end game when you're up against an opponent who you know could crush you. And they know it too, and everybody knows it. But crushing is not really an option. You can't drop a nuclear bomb, for example, on your neighbor, because you're going to get blown away as well. You can't do that. And so it's horribly complicated. And then eventually, maybe you want to show the world that you're serious, and you go all out with gruesomeness that is beyond imagination. I'm not going to go through what we've heard in the news because it sickens me, and I just can't go there again. What we saw on October 7th was Judenrein 2.0. The first major step in getting rid of Jews, taking their lives and doing to them no matter what, simply because we cannot have them around us. There is no answer as long as they are here. And you know, because you've heard it on the news, that they've spent years preparing for this. Years using humanitarian supplies that were intended for the people of Gaza, who really are victims to whoever they lay their eyes on. They are the victims of Hamas for sure. They used the resources to build tunnels, to build munitions. They knew what they were working towards, they knew what was coming, and yet they did nothing to prepare for the humanitarian needs of their own people. They did nothing to set aside medical supplies, set aside food for the Palestinian people, because the Palestinian people is not their concern. They don't care about them. And when I look at this, I realize that this is bordering on some kind of vitriolic language, but I cannot help seeing it as you look at Hamas, and it's like this cult of death. I heard on the radio, I think yesterday, one of the attackers calling his mom, "Mom, you'll never believe how many Jews I just killed." She said, "Come home now." "No, there's no coming home. I'm here till the end. I'm here until someone kills me, and then I'll be in paradise." So it's this cult of death, whether it's about killing Jews, whether it's the way they treat their own people and label anyone who dissents a collaborator with Israel, with the enemy, and tortures and kills them, or even the obsession with their own death and the sense of paradise. And here's the self-aggrandizement. It's this cult of death versus this cult of life, where they know that Israel will do anything to save an Israeli life. And that, ironically, is almost Israel's greatest weakness. When life means more than anything else, and it's so easy to take. Does Israel have a right to retaliate? 100%. Absolutely. We, any of us, who have any sense of connection to our own families, know that when push comes to the shove, we choose our own families first. We know that. We know that that seems to be a fundamental human drive. But how do we do it without causing massive casualties? Why does Israel target civilian areas and homes? Because that is where Hamas puts their whatever. We know that. But what about these poor people? And how do we relate to them? Do we just get, shrug ourselves in the hope that any sense of guilt or connection might fall off us and we absolve ourselves of anything? I don't know how we do that either. And this is the image that has been bothering me. Pesach. good, 5 months or so away. But God willing, we will all sit around a table at a Pesach Seder, at least one, and there will come a point in the evening when someone will call out the plagues. And what will we do when the plagues are called out? We'll stick something into the cup of wine and remove a drop each time. This honors a core Jewish value, a cornerstone of our religious tradition: compassion for others, even when they are our enemies. The Torah admonishes us, "You shall not abhor an Egyptian because you were a stranger in his land." Deuteronomy. Rashi reminds us that despite the slavery later inflicted upon us, the Egyptians that first took us in, when there was a famine in Canaan, we're also taught, when your enemy falls, do not rejoice. And when he or she stumbles, let not your heart be glad. Proverbs, the book of Proverbs. And hatred of other people destroys your own world. Pirkei Avot. To drive home the point, the Talmud contains a poetic midrash. When the sea of reeds engulfed the Egyptians and they were drowning, the angel began to sing praises to God. But God silenced the angel, saying, "My children are drowning and you are singing?" The thought of rejoicing over the suffering of others, even where the punishment appears to be justified, the idea of rejoicing is alien to Judaism. So we celebrate at the Seder with less than a full heart, with less than a full cup of wine. We most definitely have the right and the need to defend ourselves and to defend our place in Israel. That does not mean that we are the only ones who have a place and who should have a place and should be able to live in peace. But right now, my major concern is my family. That doesn't mean that when I see the other suffering, I turn my heart off. The road ahead, I fear, is going to be a long one. And we gather in what the conservative Masorti movement called the Solidarity Shabbat. I'd be interested to hear them actually define what they're hoping for with solidarity, because I'm sure that even in this room, we relate differently to what is going on. And maybe we want nuanced differences in the outcome. So for me, the solidarity that I would aspire to is that, number one, may our connection to each other endure what lies ahead, even if we see things differently. I would hope that our connection to Israel should endure, because things are going to go wrong. They always do in a war. And when things go wrong, we trust and hope that Israel will be honest about it and look at their mistakes, and see how to operate better in future. The road will be long, and when we see carnage on whatever side, it should bring us pain. And yet the road will be long, and may we remain loyal to our values, always remembering who we are, why we are connected in the first place, where those values come from, always seeking ways to spread love, recognizing we don't live there, we live here, and that here too, our work of creating peace for all of those who live in Rochester is far from done. And praying and being active and calling for peace in only one part of the world would be a terrible mistake and shortcoming for all of us. Shabbat Shalom.